Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Marcus Vargas, guys, and I hope you've been doing well. I know the coronavirus situation definitely has been getting exhausting, at least, for me. And in Pennsylvania here where I live, the stay-at-home orders have been extended to June 4th. I don't know what's going on around the rest of the country, but things still quarantined over here. Now, just to get off of that, dark note, the 2020 NFL schedules have finally been released. And so today's show is going to be all about that, guys. Looking at some matchups, looking at particularly one ESPN article by Mike Clay, and I just want to give you guys my opinion on what he states, because there are things I agree with here, and some things I agree a bit less on. So I just want to give my opinion on those, whether you should be eyeing certain teams for fantasy football drafting, etc., etc. So let's get started, guys. So this article is essentially, what teams / players benefit most from the 2020 NFL schedule in fantasy football. Now, just to jump right into it, for the easiest opposing defenses column, at number 1, right here, he has the Chicago Bears. Now, the one thing about the Chicago Bears, and he does mention this, their offense is nothing special. However, if you do remember, when I did my mock draft, I did end up with Allen Robinson, who did finish last year as a top 10 fantasy football wide receiver. So it's one of those situations where the entire offense as a whole probably won't put up a ton of points. But hey, technically they could score 7 points, but Allen Robinson could have 114 yards and 1 touchdown. And that's a pretty solid fantasy outing, right? So, the entire offense doesn't necessarily have to be productive for a certain player to be productive in fantasy football. You all know that. Now, he mentions here, Chicago's offense, not too impressive, but they will benefit from a light slate that includes matchups with the Panthers, Falcons, Giants, Texans, and Jaguars this season, end quote. Now, that's very, very interesting, and I dove deeper into it. The Giants, Texans, and Jaguar games are actually during the fantasy football playoffs. Something you guys definitely want to keep in mind. One thing I definitely do when I draft and after the schedules are released, I look at teams to see what their schedule is going to be like during the fantasy football playoffs, and sometimes it sways me not to draft a certain player. If it's not, you don't want to ignore talent. You're not going to ignore Christian McCaffrey because he has a tough fantasy football playoff schedule. But, getting into the middle rounds, later rounds, sometimes I'll pick a certain player over another, because of the schedule. And I think it's definitely a wise, way to look at it. I know, of course, sometimes, it's the complete opposite. It doesn't matter. The guy blows open the game. He has a game of his life against a tough defense, but it definitely is a good way to, sort of plan your draft, plan ahead so you don't end up with players that you're like, oh no, dude, they're all playing the toughest defenses here. I should have traded these guys, etc., etc. Excuse me. Also, what he mentions here is that the NFC North isn't the toughest to begin with. I agree. I do like that take. The Packers defense, even though it has improved, I don't think it's anything super, super scary. Now, they do have Jair Alexander, who's a great corner, but other than that, they do have, the Smith brothers, for the passers, but it's nothing crazy or elite, right? We saw them get taken apart by the 49ers on the ground. We saw them lose several games. They lost to the Eagles, right? So that's a team we all thought was struggling very badly, didn't have many receivers. So, Green Bay's nothing to be afraid of. The Minnesota Vikings used to be, super scary defense, one of the top defenses in the league. Xavier Howard has really, oh my gosh, that's his name, right? Xavier Howard? No, Xavier Rhodes. I'm thinking about Xavier Howard from the Dolphins. Xavier Rhodes has really, become a shell of himself. He's not what he used to be. And that defense is not what it used to be as well. And Detroit is Detroit. They are what they've been forever. Just lost their top cornerback, and of course they got Okudah, but we still have to see, what he's going to pan out to be. Of course, they drafted several defensive players, but we'll have to see what happens there. Their division's not scary, schedule's not too bad. Of course, they do have matchups against the Saints, and I believe there was one other team that I was pretty worried about. But overall, their schedule is pretty easy. I like this. So if you're a guy who wants to take, David Montgomery, Allen Robinson, you could definitely look into that. But other than that, I would stray away from the Bears in general. Now, at number 2 here, he has the San Francisco 49ers. Now, let me just read a little excerpt from here. The 49ers enjoyed a breakout 2020 season, thanks in part to Jimmy Garoppolo's first healthy campaign. The roster remains in good shape for another playoff run this season, and the offense gets a boost from a light projected slate. San Francisco's toughest matchups include trips to Dallas, New Orleans, and New England, as well as a home matchup with Buffalo. On the other hand, we'll be upgrading the 49ers offense against the likes of the Cardinals twice, Giants, Redskins, and Dolphins. Garoppolo, Raheem Mostert, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle are prime benefactors. Okay, now I did say I was going to read an excerpt, and I read the whole thing. So sorry about that, but I'm not so sold on the San Francisco 49ers. I think last year was a little bit fluky. I've said that previously. I really don't believe that Jimmy Garoppolo is that guy. He's not a quarterback that I trust, to win big games, to, be that lethal killer that we see, with Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, those clutch guys. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo has that factor as of right now. You know what I mean? Now, I understand, Bill Belichick wanted him to be the successor to Tom Brady, but he doesn't have that Tom Brady killer in him. You know what I mean? I know Tom Brady's not, you don't look at Tom Brady and think, oh, he's a killer. But, when it gets clutch time late in the game, you need to win a game, Tom Brady activates that killer mode. You know what I mean? He just goes and he takes that dub. So, as of right now, I understand they're loaded with talent, but I'm also not gonna sleep on the Dolphins defense. They've done what they need to do to sort of bolster that defense. They're coming in with confidence. I know, they had a horrible season and, they shouldn't be that confident, but, they got their guy into hopefully he stays healthy. They bolstered their defense in the offseason. I really don't think this is going to be just like last season where anyone who played the Dolphins, you put them in. I don't believe that. Also, I'm really not sure that the Cardinals defense is going to be all that crappy. I understand, Isaiah Simmons, did he necessarily have a role when they drafted him? Did they have an opening for him? Not really, but he's a Swiss Army knife. They can play him all around the field, and if he becomes the impact player that people think he will be, he'll definitely immediately bolster that defense. And they do have Byron Murphy on that team, solid young defensive back, who will definitely just slowly get better as the years go on. And I honestly think that their defense is not going to be that bad, and that offense is going to be hanging points on people. So they're going to be in a lot of high-scoring games where other defenses and their defense probably is going to let up a lot of points. So, yes, while I will say, the Cardinals I kind of agree with, but the Dolphins I don't agree with here. The Giants and Redskins, of course, they've been what they've been. But for the San Francisco 49ers, I wouldn't put them here at number 2. Maybe on paper, you can sit here and say, yes, they have the easiest offense, but I don't think they'll perform as many people think they will. That's just my opinion. I feel like last year was a little bit fluky. And that's just my opinion. Of course, you don't have to agree. Number 3, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Okay. So, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have one of the easiest schedules for 2020. As if it wasn't already pretty insane, the hype train that's building for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the NFL gives us this because, of course, quote, things are looking very pretty for the Buccaneers' 2020 fantasy outlook. It won't be all sunshine and roses for a unit that will need to face off with the strong Saints, twice of course, Broncos, Chargers, and Viking defenses. But those games are more than offset by showdowns with the Giants, Raiders, Falcons twice, Panthers twice. Okay, I like this take here. And honestly, even though the Saints are going to be a scary team, I have a strong feeling that those games are going to be shootouts. And I think that, both teams are going to be putting up a lot of points. So I really, really like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I would put them personally at number 2. I wouldn't have put the 49ers there just because, well, I understand the sentiment. You're putting, the 49ers have shown us that they can do it. They've been together already. They made a Super Bowl run, Super Bowl trip. So we know what they are. We don't know what the Buccaneers are yet. Right? So a lot of people are jumping on the hype, the bandwagon. I am. For fantasy football, I am most certainly jumping on that hype train. I'm not saying that this team is going to go win the Super Bowl. I'm saying they have a shot to win the division. But, that doesn't mean they're not a great fantasy football offense. 30 interceptions doesn't make you a horrible fantasy football quarterback, as we saw Jameis Winston do last season. Right? So, I think definitely, Brady's getting upgrades. Mike Evans getting an upgrade. Chris Godwin, Gronkowski, maybe. I know a lot of people are projecting Gronkowski to be one of those top tight ends. Got to see what happens first, and if his body can hold up. He also has here upgrade Ronald Jones and Keyshawn Vaughn. I want to see. I hope Keyshawn Vaughn takes a starting role because I'm just not impressed with Ronald Jones thus far in his career. I don't think he's the number one guy who could take that workhorse role, and I want to see some new, fresh meat sort of take that starting job. So Tampa Bay Buccaneers, guys, that's going to be a team a lot of people are drafting from, especially with the hype. So if you don't, get to land one of those guys, definitely pay attention to who you're drafting with. If they're going to hop on that hype train, that bandwagon, a guy like me, who's definitely going to want Chris Godwin, etc., just be ready to make your counter moves because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be one of the more popular offenses this season. Sort of, you're going to see in a similar vein of the Kansas City Chiefs, where you'll see guys, you'll even see Raiders fans out there drafting Kansas City Chiefs for fantasy football because everybody knows you can sort of pick and choose with the Kansas City offense. So definitely very, very interesting. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'll put them above the San Francisco 49ers. Honestly, they have more upside even at number 3 than the Chicago Bears with the easiest opposing defenses, even with their playoff games there. So that's my opinion on those guys, and we're running out of time here. So we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we'll switch gears, and we'll talk about teams who face the toughest opposing defenses next season, at least from what we saw last season. Of course, with everything, you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? Because top teams can end up severely underperforming. Teams with great talent on the paper really don't mesh well together, et cetera, right? So, of course, we're going off of what we've seen and who they still have and who they've added. But how that plays out, of course, is going only to be proven when the season actually begins. So, with that, guys, we're going to take a short break. When we get back, like I said, we'll switch gears and do the toughest defenses. So, enjoy the break, guys. We'll be right back after this.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Alright, we just got done talking about some teams with the easiest schedules in terms of, looking at it from a fantasy football standpoint. And now we're going to look at the three teams that Mike Clay has here facing the toughest schedule for fantasy football. Now, I'm definitely more interested in this side because he starts off with a team that I've been pretty low on. Not low on, I guess I should just say, not as high as everyone else. And this team is the Tennessee Titans. Now he says here, Tennessee is set to face a generous chunk of the league's top defenses. Showdowns against the Ravens, Broncos, Bears, Vikings, who I don't know why he says that here because he earlier said they're not that tough of a defense. Bills, Steelers, and Colts twice. It makes up half of the Titans' slate. Their, quote, easiest matchups are within the division against Houston and Jacksonville units that are trending the wrong direction. This is obviously concerning news for Tannehill, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Jonnu Smith. Okay, while I definitely agree with this statement, I don't agree with the Vikings pick for, league's top defenses. He contradicted himself. He earlier even said, the Vikings aren't what they used to be. The NFC North is not anything crazy, but we'll overlook that. That's fine. This is telling. I've kind of spoken about the Tennessee Titans as a team that I don't think is going to repeat the kind of success that they had last season. I don't feel that, with Ryan Tannehill, A.J. Brown, and Jonnu Smith for the pass attack, you can sort of, kind of switch gears and change up your identity. Their identity, I feel, is going to be similar. Let Derrick Henry tote the rock. Let Derrick Henry run through people, stiff arm guys to the end zone, break off gigantic runs. And teams are going to catch on to it, figure it out, and find ways to stop him. The Chiefs did it, and, other teams can do it as well. And remember, the Chiefs, during the regular season, were the team that basically set off Derrick Henry's historic late season run. And even they figured out, this is what we have to do to stop him. And if that way is putting up a ton of points on the board, so they have to throw the ball, then so be it, right? You just find a way to do it. I've said before, they seem like a one-dimensional kind of team where I don't fear their passing attack. I only fear their passing attack because of the running attack. And when that's going well, you can play action out of that and have guys wide open down the field, right? But other than that, if Derrick Henry's not going, I don't think the entire team is going. But regardless of that, their schedule is pretty darn scary. I mean, Ravens, Broncos, Bears, Bills, Steelers, and the Colts twice. People have talked about Jacksonville being sort of a sleeper kind of team with adding Kayvon Chase on for pass rush. That they're not going to be, completely horrible. And it's just, I'm really not sure about them. I think, do you downgrade Derrick Henry severely? I'm not sure. But I mean, he ain't going to do the same thing he did last year against the Ravens again. I'll tell you that. I really don't see this ending up well for the Titans. I think they'll have a much more disappointing season than people are expecting. That's why, I've sort of selected the Colts to be my winner out of that division, with the Titans being second, maybe even third. This schedule is pretty difficult. But yeah, for fantasy football guys, I think this certainly downgrades most of their players: Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Jonnu Smith, and even Ryan Tannehill. Not sure how well they're going to fare against that tough of a schedule. I'm not saying, you downgrade Derrick Henry to a third-round pick, but you certainly tamper your expectations, and we're going to have to wait and see if he can continue that momentum that he had. All right, number 2 here. It's nothing you should be concerned about because it's a team that not many were going to draft from anyway. The New York Jets. Right here are number 2 with the second toughest defenses on their schedule for fantasy football. Okay, the Jets' schedule is loaded with tough matchups, including the division rivals Bills, defense twice, Pats twice, Broncos, 49ers, Colts, and Chargers. Oof. And guys, I would even throw in, I believe that the Dolphins' defense is going to step up, and they're going to have to play them twice a year as well. As we saw last season, they didn't have the greatest run game, they didn't have the greatest pass game, so, you don't have to have the craziest of a defense to stop the New York Jets. Hopefully their run game picks up because, I've been vouching for Le'Veon Bell. But here he says you should be downgrading Sam Darnold, Le'Veon, Jamison Crowder, Brashad Perriman, and the intriguing sleeper Chris Herndon. Now, I don't know how much downgrading you can do here. Because the New York Jets are the New York Jets. I don't think, anyone was saying, were we building hype on Sam Darnold? Were we, having increasing interest in Jamison Crowder or Brashad Perriman? I'm not sure. Not as much as we had on the Jets last season, because in my opinion, Brashad Perriman is just now like we treat him as we treated Robbie Anderson. The deep threat that they had, with Sam Darnold and Jamison Crowder, while they were still there. So, to me, this doesn't mean much to me. It just means, stay away from the Jets as much as you would have last season. Maybe besides Le'Veon, besides Sam Darnold. I know some guys, Jamison Crowder put up some pretty good numbers in PPR leagues, certain games, but not very reliable. I know he had a big game late in the season last season, but, none of these guys were guys that were constantly reliable, and nothing that I'm not shocked about or worried about. It's the Jets, guys. They faced really tough schedules, so treat them how you treat them. All right, number 3 here, and this one's interesting because there's a lot of hype surrounding this team, the Las Vegas Raiders. He says here, quote, John Gruden and company will have their hands full this season with a lengthy list of strong defenses on the slate. That list includes the Chargers twice, as well as the Broncos twice, Saints, Patriots, Bills, Colts, and improved Buccaneers. Okay. That's pretty darn tough. The Chargers defense, guys, is going to step up big. Not that they were bad anyway. Have you seen their defense? It's freaking loaded. Derwin James comes back fully healthy. Their secondary is probably the scariest in football, not going to lie. And they're in my division, so of course that is a bit concerning. But when you don't have Patrick Mahomes and an offense that can score seemingly at will, you should be concerned when facing this defense. Now, they do have games against the Panthers, Falcons, and Dolphins, he says here, but as I've said before, guys, I don't think the Dolphins are going to be as easy as everyone thinks. So that would leave the list with Panthers and Falcons as their easiest games. So I really don't see, if you were thinking about getting Henry Ruggs in fantasy football next season, he might give you a game or two, but they are facing a really tough schedule and they're definitely going to be eyeing in on Henry Ruggs and his deep threat potential. Definitely downgrading Derek Carr. I don't know, but Josh Jacobs was sort of a star last year before he got hurt, so I don't know if I'm downgrading him. He seems like a guy, who could come out and sort of become the core of this team and the rock that's constantly productive. He could be one of those guys that's sort of matchup proof. But Derek Carr definitely, because I don't think he's going to match. He had his sort of a career best season last season. I don't think he matches that. Facing these teams, man, oh my goodness. It's definitely a tough team. And just an interesting note, the Buccaneers defense wasn't that bad last season, guys. It's when your quarterback is constantly putting you back on the field right after you made a stop or you had a long drive, it's almost impossible to play good defense. And that's one thing we have to remember. These guys aren't robots. As much as we see them as, big celebrities and untouchable figures, they're not robots, they're human beings. At one point, when the Chiefs were, struggling with Patrick Mahomes' his first year as a starter, I used to get upset. Yes, it's so exciting to watch him, gun the ball down the field and we score in 2 seconds. But I used to get upset because I'm like, man, this defense needs to rest, man. You gotta relax a little bit. Let's slow down this game. And, with Andy Reid's play calling, he's calling all these, play action deep bombs and, he doesn't want to throw short. He doesn't want to run the ball. That was pretty frustrating. So remember that, guys. Sometimes your defense is worse because your offense is so good and constantly putting them back on the field. So don't sleep on the Buccaneers defense this season, guys. I think they'll have definitely more methodical drives. They're not just going to be launching it down the field like Jameis Winston likes to do. Not going to be turning the ball over as much, so their defense isn't going to be on the field and tired as much. So they're definitely going to improve. But definitely downgrade Las Vegas' skill players. I mean, it's not a team that I was eyeing up much besides Josh Jacobs and maybe Derek Carr if I ended up without a quarterback. Definitely Darren Waller. But the thing is, Darren Waller, guys, you really want to downgrade a tight end when it's such a scarce position to begin with. I think you still should be drafting Darren Waller. He's definitely going to still be a big piece in this offense. But with that, guys, we're going to take a short break. And when we get back, we'll talk about some, fantasy football playoffs and who sort of has the easier schedules during the most crucial time of the season. So stick around, guys. Enjoy the break. We'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Alright, we just got done talking about, some teams that are facing the toughest fantasy football defenses. And now we're going to move into, what teams should you be eyeing during those weeks 14 through 16, which is, most of you are going to be playing your fantasy football playoffs then. I know some people, for some reason, will, extend their playoffs to week 17. Not the wisest choice, guys, because, a lot of teams rest their best players, and that means your best fantasy football players won't be playing. So that's why we'll be focusing on weeks 14 through 16. So the most interesting point here Mike Clay makes, something you all should be paying attention to. Doesn't really affect what you're doing because we're going to draft from this team anyway, but definitely puts them in puts it in a more interesting perspective. Quote, reigning NFL MVP Lamar Jackson and the rest of the Ravens offense will benefit from the easiest projected schedule during the fantasy playoffs. End quote. Do I need to say more? The Ravens offense, while not as loaded as the Chiefs offense, puts up a ton of fantasy football points. Now, the reason why I say that, why I say they're not as loaded as, certain other defenses like the Chiefs, other defenses like, let's say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at this point, in my opinion, is because if you aren't a running back or you're not Mark Andrews, then you don't really score fantasy football points, right? Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, Mark Andrews, that was it basically. Of course, the first couple games of the season, Marquise Brown gave us, that first week in Miami, Marquise Brown gave us a show, right? But after that, he really didn't get anywhere close to that again. Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, Mark Andrews, those were the guys that you were constantly playing with confidence. Of course, Gus Edwards had some interesting games, interesting runs, but wasn't, fantasy football relevant per se. Besides that, there's really nothing on that offense that I would want to take. However, they face Cleveland at Cleveland in week 14, and then they host the Jaguars and Giants after that. Those are going to be huge fantasy football games for them, at least I believe. And if Lamar Jackson is going to be throwing the ball more, which I believe he will, it'll be a boost to Marquise Brown. Hopefully that's what they're doing. I hope they don't come up with the same sort of style offense where it's just running all the time and only throwing to tight ends. But Mark Ingram, Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown, and perhaps even rookies J.K. Dobbins and Devin Duvernay are due for boosts here. That's what he says. But I'm going to go more with J.K. Dobbins. I think Mark Ingram might fall off a bit next season. And if J.K. Dobbins comes in and lives up to the hype that he had coming into the draft, he'll become that number one runner. Mark Ingram will sort of fall into irrelevance, and he'll be off the team quite soon. Because we have to remember, Mark Ingram had an insane efficiency rating with the touchdowns. He had 10 touchdowns last season on, not that many touches. I mean, Mark Ingram never exceeded 20 rushing attempts in a game last season. So we got to think about that. Also, he wasn't the biggest pass catcher, never exceeding 5 catches in a single game, had multiple games with just 1 or 2. So, he was very, very efficient with the touches he was given. Rushed for just over 1,000 yards on 200 attempts. So he was very, very efficient. I really don't know that he's going to be, that main guy. He's going to be 30, or I think he's 30 now. So that essentially means his clock is, the sands in the glass are getting very, very low. And, drafting a guy like J.K. Dobbins, I think, that's going to make him an RB2 kind of guy. Maybe you'll play him at your flex. Maybe he'll steal some touchdowns. But I think, the Ravens are looking to sort of bring in that new wave at running back. So definitely something we're going to have to keep our eyes on. But super easy schedule for the playoffs. Baltimore Ravens, any of those guys, just pick them up for sure. All right. Now he says the Packers, Titans, Seahawks, and 49ers round out the top 5 easiest playoff slates. Okay. He doesn't mention who they play, which is not helpful, of course. But we can definitely go in and look at that, and then I'll definitely give my analysis on that one. He says here, on the other hand, the Bills check in with what is easily the toughest schedule during the fantasy playoffs. Even worse, the brutal slate actually starts just after Buffalo's Week 11 bye. The Bills host the Chargers before traveling to San Francisco. Then they kick off the fantasy playoffs with a home game against Pittsburgh, followed by trips to Denver and New England. Oof. Okay. All right. So basically what this is going to mean is that, if you have some sort of their skill position players, maybe guys that are performing pretty solidly but not, too elite, you're going to want to trade them before their bye. I think if you can trade them for significant value for guys that aren't going to, have as tough schedules during the fantasy football playoffs, that's going to be key. Josh Allen, guys, while I hope he takes a step forward, am I expecting it? I'm not sure, right? I was expecting more of a step last season. He wasn't very efficient as a passer, and I think against teams like Pittsburgh, Denver, and New England, you're going to have to be an efficient passer. You're not going to be able to just get it done on the ground, running around and being athletic. Now, I don't like this for Josh Allen, guys. If I had him on my team, I'd look to trade him. Like I said, I'm a guy who usually drafts 2 quality quarterbacks for that reason, just in case one gets injured, or if I want to trade one, or one has a tougher game than the other, I'll put him in. I'll put the other in. Of course, you want another one, for the bye week, but I have mine for other reasons as well. So that is not looking good. And honestly, any of those guys, Josh Allen, Singletary, Zach Moss, if he becomes, a featured part of that offense, Stephon Diggs and John Brown, those are definitely people I'm not going to be, Stephon Diggs, I imagine he gets shadowed by Stephon Gilmore in New England, becomes irrelevant in that game. Josh Allen has to deal, maybe start seeing ghosts like Sam Darnold against Bill Belichick's defenses. And yeah, I don't like that for the Bills. So definitely stay away from them, for the fantasy football playoffs. He says here the Steelers, Texans, and Vikings are next up in terms of toughest slate during weeks 14 through 16. Doesn't say who they play, unfortunately. But he says you need to get to the playoffs in order to take advantage of this section, so this information will be best served as a tiebreaker or perhaps when fielding trade offers during the season. Definitely agree with that there. This is of course, you can't just sit here and say, oh, well, they're going to be, they have a tough schedule in the playoffs, so I can't. No, you have to make sure you're going to make the playoffs first, right? Before you start trading these people or you make these sort of decisions when drafting. If you're a guy who constantly is in your fantasy football playoffs, maybe you play in a weak league and other guys just play for fun or something like that, of course. Oh, excuse me. Wow. Sorry about that, guys. Of course, take advantage of this information, but this is going to be information for guys that you're going to be using, the middle of the season when you're sort of getting the idea of if you're going to be in the playoffs or not, and then you make trades based on this knowledge. So that's that. Now we move on, guys, to easiest overall schedules, not even just playing easy defenses. Now this right here is going to be very, very interesting because I'm liking what I'm seeing. All right. To start off, number 1, easiest overall schedule, the Indianapolis Colts. All right, doesn't get much better for them. The Indianapolis Colts, honestly, just drafting Jonathan Taylor got me excited. But it says here, the Colts roster continues to improve. GM Chris Ballard's doing a great job, even after Andrew Luck had that shocking retirement. But, like I said, I think the Colts are going to win that division. And now seeing that they have the easiest overall schedule, I become more confident in that decision. Definitely more confident for their fantasy football outlook. They play 6 divisional games against the Houston Texans, Tennessee Titans, Jacksonville Jaguars. Here he says who all arguably got worse on paper during the offseason or are candidates for a regression. Definitely the Texans and Titans candidates for regression. They play the Jets, Bengals, Raiders, and Bears. Very, very easy. Their hardest games are the Steelers and Ravens. For sure, look at the Indianapolis Colts for fantasy football, guys. I think Phillip Rivers is going to do well. T.Y. Hilton. Jonathan Taylor, I think, is eventually going to take the starting role from Marlon Mack if he doesn't during the offseason. They're going to be a pretty solid team, guys. I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Colts. I'm not sure why. It feels like the Colts are sort of slept on every year, even when they had Andrew Luck. Maybe it's because I don't know. Maybe it's their vibe, their tradition, their style. Maybe it's not, because they're behind in terms of, brand updating or their uniform, something like that. Maybe because they haven't done anything crazy since Peyton, but they've been solid for years now, and I think it's about time they do something, make a very deep playoff push. Do I think they'll top my Chiefs? No, of course not, but I think, you guys got to pay attention to them. I don't think Phillip Rivers is going to do as bad as he did last season. I think he'll improve severely, or greatly, I should say, behind that offensive line. So look for the Indianapolis Colts guys, players, to give you some good fantasy football success. Okay, with that, guys, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, I will finish off this list, talk more about some schedule stuff, and yeah, all that good stuff. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back. We just got done talking about the team that had the easiest schedule, and that was the Indianapolis Colts. And we move on here because this next team I'm definitely very, very interested in, because it's a team that I'm definitely higher on than most. Okay, the Miami Dolphins are number 2 with the easiest overall schedule. Now, Mike Clay says here, Miami overachieved on the stretch last season, but this is a still rebuilding, parentheses, albeit improved, end parentheses, roster with a lot of youth positioned for big roles. That said, a relatively light schedule will be beneficial in 2020. The Dolphins' toughest matchups are the Chiefs, Niners, Seahawks, and Broncos. Their easiest, the Jags, the Jets twice, the Raiders, Bengals, and Cardinals. I don't know why this guy keeps putting Cardinals as easiest on a lot of these teams' schedules, but hey, it is what it is. With the Patriots trending down, the AFC East is wide open, so perhaps the light slate will keep Miami in the mix. That I like, because if you remember, when I did my divisional rankings and how I thought they might play out, I had Miami at the number 2 spot, with possibly being a crazy, upset potential candidate. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Miami because of their recent, abysmal play, but, they're a team that was very committed to rebuilding that defense. And even though, yes, they're in rebuild mode, I think they're more talented than people are giving them credit for. I think head coach Brian Flores is doing a good job. And, I like the culture switch in Miami, and I think that they're going to be set, to make a lot of people, wrong and surprise a lot of people. I think if Tua, I'm telling you guys, if he comes in and he starts and he's healthy, he's going to change life down there in Miami, and I don't get it. I don't know why. This team beat the Patriots last season. Not many teams did that. And I don't care, what you guys want to say about, it was week 17 and, they already had the playoff spot and, they always beat the Pats and they always have the recipe, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. Yes, okay, the Dolphins always seem to get a win, over the Pats, but, Brian Flores hasn't been the coach forever, every time the Dolphins have beat the Pats. And, to be a team that everyone counted out as a super easy victory, and to go out there and beat the number 1 ranked defense in the league last season, that historic defense, who basically scored enough to go, 6-3, some crazy record, even if the offense didn't step on the field. through the first 9 weeks. To beat that team is very, very impressive. And just to remind you guys, that game was very important to the Pats because they lost second seed because of that loss to the Dolphins, and that potentially stopped them from winning another Super Bowl. So, I know a lot of people might have thought, that game wasn't important in week 17 against the Dolphins. No, it was very important, and they couldn't afford to lose it. So, keep that in mind. Ryan Fitzpatrick made a crazy game-winning drive on them, and the Dolphins helped the Chiefs get second seed and of course, helped their Super Bowl run. So, definitely was a very important game, and I think the Dolphins certainly will be in the mix to win that division. The Bills don't do anything crazy. They have an awesome defense, but, and nothing on offense right now is like jumping off the board as, giving me overwhelming favorite vibes. They are the early favorite, but they could easily be overthrown. And honestly, they might sweep the Pats this time around. I know they always steal a win or two. Steal a win here and there, but I think they might sweep the Pats this time, as the Pats are not trending in the right direction. So, pay attention to Miami Dolphins, guys. They might surprise a lot of people next season. Their defense, I think, is going to be better than a lot of people think. Number 3 here, I'm liking this here because it's a team that I'm up on, but Mike Clay, for some reason, isn't, and a lot of people are sleeping on these guys. The Arizona Cardinals with the 3rd easiest overall schedule. This is not just about defenses they face now, guys. He says the Arizona offense had the easiest projected schedule this time last season, and following a bit of a slow start, it went on to score 3 or more touchdowns during 8 of its final 11 games. In Kyler and Cliff Kingsbury's second season, the team will benefit from a light slate. Blah, blah, blah. The Cardinals' toughest matchups are against the Niners, Seahawks twice, Eagles, and Cowboys. Easy matchups include Panthers, Redskins, Dolphins, who aren't going to be that easy, I don't believe. Giants, Jets, and not to mention the Rams twice, who are trending in the wrong direction. So they do have a lot of easy games, and honestly, I got them beating the Panthers, beating the Redskins, beating the Dolphins, beating the Giants, Jets, and beating the Rams twice. So that's 7 wins right there. I also think they're going to split the series with the Niners and the Seahawks. You guys have to remember, last season, the Cardinals took the 49ers to very close finishes. They were one of the teams that, for some reason, both times they played, sort of had them figured out and just needed something to get over that hump. Remember, Larry Fitzgerald was the top receiver on that team at the time, and now they have DeAndre Hopkins. And I understand, adding one player doesn't, not going to, win you a Super Bowl, but let's remember Dak Prescott before and after Amari Cooper. Can we talk about that? How he basically made Dak Prescott look amazing and get this sort of, leverage to ask for this insane contract. Can we talk about that? That was the addition of one receiver, guys. So DeAndre Hopkins is a significant, Larry Fitzgerald, don't get me wrong, guys, legend, walking into the Hall of Fame, solid receiver, but right now at this point in time, DeAndre Hopkins over him for sure. Significant upgrade to the receiving core. That's exactly what Kyler Murray needs, guys. Especially with his mobility, he can improvise, he can scramble, make throws down the field. This is going to be a great season for the Cardinals. I don't understand why people are sleeping on them. I see them being a potential threat to definitely make the playoffs, take one of those wild card spots. I don't know if they'll edge out the 49ers for the division, but I think they'll be second just over the Seahawks in a crazy finish to that division. I think it's definitely one of the toughest, if not one of the toughest division in football. But Arizona Cardinals with a super easy schedule definitely look to draft their players. Kenyon Drake, Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. If you want to, maybe have, what's this guy? I'm blanking on his name. Christian Kirk for a flex kind of guy. I think that they're going to be a high-powered offense. So keep your eyes on them, guys. I don't know why everyone's sleeping. All right, moving on to toughest overall schedules, guys. Looking at this list here, the top 3, it sucks because these are 3 teams that cannot afford to have tough schedules right now. Number 1, the Atlanta Falcons. Man, last year they struggled a lot. They underperformed. I thought they would do much better than they did last season, but for some reason they just can't get their things together. They finished 7-9, and honestly, it's looking like they're going to finish 7-9 or 8-8 at this point. They have to play the Saints twice. They have to play the Bucs twice. Those are already 4 very hard games. Yes, they could steal 1 or 2 of those games, but, as of right now, you would expect them to be swept, right? They also play the Cowboys, the Chiefs, the Packers, Vikings, and Broncos. Oh, man. So they have very tough games ahead of them. Of course, they play the Panthers twice, who people think of as an easy game right now because they're rebuilding. But, hey, don't sleep on Christian McCaffrey. He'll carry that team to at least one victory. They could steal a game in that series. So Sucks. I wouldn't devalue their players all the way. I still believe in Julio. I still believe in Calvin Ridley and Matt Ryan, who is a former MVP, which a lot of people seem to forget. They're definitely going to be still solid for fantasy football, but the team overall don't think it's going to do too well. Remember, Julio was a top fantasy football wide receiver last season. They went 7-9. So same thing could happen again. They're still going to be relevant for fantasy football. I don't think it downgrades them that much. You're fine. Keep drafting them. Number 2 here, Carolina Panthers, which I'll just say now it's not going to affect people drafting McCaffrey first overall. Definitely draft him. No doubt about that. They're in rebuild mode. Sucks for them, but I guess it helps them because they'll be losing a lot of games. They'll have a high draft pick. There's not much to say here, guys, but they play, the Saints twice, Buccaneers twice, just like the Falcons. Vikings, Packers, Chiefs, Broncos. Definitely going to be a tough schedule. Here he says the lightest matchups are the Cards, Bears, Raiders, and Redskins, but I think the Cardinals are not going to be an easy matchup. Bears defense could definitely step up and maybe have an upset win there. But yes, not much to say on the Carolina Panthers. You're still drafting McCaffrey. You're still going to draft DJ Moore. Do I think he's going to be as, prolific as he should be? No, because he has Teddy Bridgewater and not someone like Cam Newton, who is healthy and playing at full potential. But it is what it is. Number 3 here, man. The Washington Redskins with the number 3 toughest overall schedule. Wow. Okay, so new head coach, new culture. I do like, bringing in Ron Rivera for the Redskins, but I think this is going to be one of those years, first season as the head coach, getting a high draft pick, continuing the rebuild, because, they play the Cowboys twice, they play the Eagles twice, the Giants will take a game or maybe even both, and, I just think after that, what's the point, right? Because they play the Ravens, the Seahawks, the Steelers, and the Niners. Man, very, very tough schedule. The easiest game might be the Bengals, but they also have to play the Cardinals. This might be even the toughest schedule I'm reading here because it looks rough. Just of course on paper, maybe it's not, the best teams fully, across the board, but the Redskins aren't that great of a team, so it's hard to say, that they might beat certain teams or upset them. So those are the top 3 here for the toughest schedules. These are teams you're not going to be drafting many Redskins players. You're not going to be drafting many Panthers players. The most here is the Falcons, but I don't think you're going to be concerned because it's Julio, it's Matt Ryan. Maybe for Calvin Ridley you're a bit concerned, but these are guys who are going to put up numbers regardless. And, I actually forgot to mention Todd Gurley is also on the Falcons too, so you're probably going to be drafting those guys regardless. So with that, guys, we'll go into our break. When we get back, I want to talk about who he has here for his projected seeding, because I think it's very interesting. So stick around, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Guys, welcome back. Now we move into AFC and NFC playoff seed projections. We just got done talking a bunch of schedule stuff, easiest schedules, easiest defenses, toughest defenses that people are facing, and now we're going to go ahead and talk about the playoff projections because, as you all know, 2 new teams being added, 1 less bye week. Very, very interesting stuff. So we'll start with the AFC here, and I'm going to go over what Mike Clay has here as his projected seeds, and I'll let you know if I agree, why or why not. Okay, let's get into it. So the number 1 seed he has in the AFC, the Chiefs. Clearly, I agree with that. No qualms there. I think, of course, people always want to talk about the Chiefs' defense. It's the only thing they can talk about. People want to talk about something for every team, so they're going to find something. Yes, we're talking about the Chiefs' defense as the weak point, but that team just won a Super Bowl with that defense, and it returns most of the starters on that Super Bowl team on both sides of the ball. So I'm not really worried about us sort of regressing at this point in time. I think, and even adding Clyde Edwards-Helaire, adding Willie Gay, a super athletic linebacker in the draft, will help the defense and offense respectively. And also, they have the 10th easiest projected schedule right now. So, they're pretty well positioned for the number 1 seed. Now, the number 2, of course, he has, and I also agree, the Ravens, who will be fighting for that number 1 spot and could easily, take it if they continue the success that they had last season. However, my others and myself, I predict that they'll regress on offense, but their defense is going to pick them up where their offense lacks, because they've had so many good additions. They had a good draft, great draft. A lot of people say even the best draft, and I think they're going to be top candidate for the 1 or 2 seed for sure. They're definitely going to win their division, no doubt about that. They will not slip past the 2 seed. Number 3 here he has, and I agree with, the Colts. The Colts, I think right now they're going to be the best team in the AFC South. And as we talked about earlier, with the league's easiest projected schedule, they're positioned to win that division and make it to the playoffs in Phillip Rivers' first season as their quarterback. Now, after that, he has the Bills here, but this is the shakiest one out of the top 4. I think they could easily be overthrown by the Dolphins here, just because the AFC East is the most wide open division. Even the Pats could come in if they field another amazing defense like that. And Bill Belichick has Jared Stidham become the next Tom Brady, who we're all doubting, and somehow he becomes, the GOAT. Of course they're gonna snatch the playoff spot from the Bills. But he has the Bills here. I have no qualms with it. Not going to say that I completely agree with it, but it's fine here. For the first wild card spot, he has the Steelers, and I'm definitely going to agree with that. The Steelers always find a way to make the playoffs. They're getting Ben Roethlisberger back. Their defense is definitely one of the top in the league. The offense should definitely pick up. Of course, we'll have to see how Ben has recovered from his elbow injury. Yes, it was an elbow injury. And we'll have to see how he plays, but I see the Steelers getting a playoff spot for sure. Now, here is where we, take different paths. We diverge on the road. He has the Broncos at 6, Browns at 7. Now, I don't care about the order of the seeding. I just don't think that these 2 teams will be in the playoffs, and I'm not sure 3 teams from the AFC North are going to make the playoffs. Now, it very well could happen. Of course, it's happened, without this new extra spot, 3 teams from the same division. But if any team from the AFC West is going to take that spot, I think it's going to be the Chargers. Of course, the Broncos have added, they have a great defense. They've improved the offense, but Drew Lock is the wild card right now, and I'm not sure about him just yet. Of course, he's not a bum by any means. I just think we have to see what he can bring to the team. But as of right now, I like the Chargers better, to be honest, and I understand people sleep on Tyrod Taylor and that team, but their offense is solid. Their defense is very, very good, and I think they can take that spot over the Broncos. Number 7, not in any particular order, but I think the Texans are going to take a wild card spot. I think they have this biggest chance. Of course, I think I ranked them at number 3 in their division when I did the seeding, but, seeing, Tennessee Titans have one of the toughest schedules, and the more and more I sit on it, the more I think about it, the more I just feel, Texans with a more dynamic quarterback, an amazing clutch guy, playmaker. I think the quarterback play will take them over the Titans, and they might take that playoff spot over the Browns. I definitely don't agree with the Broncos and Browns here. I would pick teams like the Chargers and the Texans. But he does mention here the Browns barely get the nod over the Titans, Chargers, Texans, and Brady-less Patriots. But I don't think I would give the Browns that spot just yet. But the Browns do look to be a significantly improved team. Maybe they even take, the first wild card spot. But I just, as of right now, in that division with the Steelers and Ravens, I see them easily having those 4 losses. You know what I mean? I could see them, both of those teams, sweeping the Cleveland Browns. Now for the NFC, very, very interesting. Number 1, he has the Saints. I can get behind that. With Drew Brees, a lot of it has to do with it being Drew Brees' last ride, them wanting to go all in and just they know that this is their shot right now before they kind of get into a rebuild. Not a full rebuild, but, they have to draft a new quarterback, a new era begins, unless they want to, go at it with Jameis Winston after this season. But Saints number one, I don't think there's much to say. They have a, very, very, very solid roster. Michael Thomas is still in that team setting records. Drew Brees, their defense is solid. They just have a very consistent team, a consistently good team with Sean Payton as a head coach still. They'll continue to have success. Number 2, 49ers. Number 3, Cowboys. Number 4, Packers. Yes, I can get behind that. I can definitely get behind that. But the Cowboys, of course, could easily lose that division to the Eagles because they always do something to mess it up. Right now, they're my early favorite, but I could easily see the Eagles becoming my favorite because, I don't know, man. That ever since that Super Bowl run, the underdog mentality, they play hard, they somehow find a way to win the division. I think they could easily do that. Packers, I think just because, they have Aaron Rodgers, I believe in them constantly. They can win the division, but don't sleep on the Vikings too much. But as of right now, yes, the Packers, I think, lead that division. The Buccaneers, Seahawks, and Eagles for the wild card spots. For sure, Buccaneers. I'm definitely going to take that because I think, I don't think, the hype is wrong. I definitely am on that bandwagon, sort of, and I think that no, they're not going to win division and go 13-3, but I think they go maybe 10-6 and get a wild card spot. Seahawks, while I understand the pick, I'm just going to stick with my opinion and I'm going to go with the Cardinals there, just because I'm not a guy who likes to constantly flip-flop. I'm sticking by my choice. I believe in the Cardinals to have that crazy push forward and Kyler Murray to have a sort of leap. I'll call it a leap year, like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson did. And I think they steal the spot over the Seahawks. And at number 7 with the Eagles here, I really, really like that pick because the Eagles and Cowboys are going to be very, very close, constantly competing for that division lead. And I think, either one of them could easily have that last wild card spot. So, very, very interesting. From that, I'll give you guys my prediction for the Super Bowl. And I had this prediction a few years ago, back when the Patriots won, the Chiefs and the Saints. Those are my picks right now, my super early picks for the Super Bowl. Of course, I'm going to pick my Chiefs, not just because they're my favorite team, but because they're the defending champs. They're the early favorites to win the AFC. Super, super talented offensive roster. They bring back a lot of guys on defense. I don't think we lose anyone on offense at this point in time. No, we're bringing back everyone on offense. It's just, great roster, great group of guys, great culture. And Patrick Mahomes is still that quarterback. So honestly, even if we would have lost a key guy or two on offense, I'd still be pretty confident. So with that, guys, we're going to take our short break before we get into our last segment of the day. I hope you've enjoyed all this schedule talk, guys. I know, maybe it could get repetitive at times, but this new schedule, it came out later than usual. Definitely exciting because it's just something, that this makes me feel like the NFL is closer and closer and gives me more hope for the NFL to start on time. Just looking at the schedule, being able to analyze and say, oh, this team's up these matchups and this, that, and the third. And just, looking at the primetime games, there's great games on slate next year. The Chiefs play the Ravens, Titans play the Ravens again, the 49ers play the Saints again. There are so many good games, next season. I'm pretty sure the Bucks play the Patriots, the Chiefs play the Bucks, I believe. There are just such good games on slate next season, guys. It's going to be a wonderful season. I can't wait for it to happen. I'm pretty sure the Packers play the Niners again. There's just so many good games next season. I'm so excited for this season. Hopefully it starts on time. But with that, guys, we'll take a short break, enjoy it, and we'll be right back for our last segment.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Alrighty, people, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Okay, guys, we are in the last segment of the day, and today I wanted to switch it up a little bit and just keep the whole motif of, NFL schedule going. And I want to talk to you guys about the games I'm most excited to watch next season. And, of course, I'm going to start with the revenge games because, honestly, these games, for me, are always the most entertaining. And even though sometimes, they don't end up, being anything spectacular or, the player doesn't do much, when that player does, I don't know, there's just a magic to it, People talked about when OBJ was finally back in New York and he played the Jets and he went off against them. There's something more to it than just, OBJ having a great game. So let's talk about some of these revenge games and ones I'm most excited for. Now, the first one, top of my list right now, Eagles versus Seahawks, or you could say, I guess, Carson Wentz versus Seahawks, Week 12. I believe that's also a primetime game. I'm not sure, but I believe that's a primetime game. I'm for sure going to be tuning into that game. I mean, I watch as many games as possible. I also watch Red Zone on Sundays as well. But Carson Wentz, because of the Seahawks, still does not have a playoff victory. Thanks to Jadeveon Clowney, has not started a full playoff game. Very, very unfortunate for him, but I think when they get back into this game, I think the Eagles are gonna win this game, because, I don't think the Seattle Seahawks have done, enough during the offseason to, make me feel like they're going to be a heavy hitter. They're still going to be a solid team, but I feel at this point in time, Eagles want revenge. The Seattle Seahawks probably won't have Jadeveon Clowney. There's actually talk that there's buzz that he might be an Eagle, but I'm really looking forward to this game. The Eagles and Seahawks always have great games. For some reason, the Seahawks usually edge them out. Even during their Super Bowl run, Russell Wilson and the Seahawks took down Carson Wentz and the Eagles during the regular season. So, yes, that's number one for me. Another one that people are going to be, I guess, interested in watching, Myles Garrett or the Browns versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Guys, we all know the drama that took place with Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph, the craziness that ensued late in that game when the game was basically over. Definitely one of the more memorable moments of the 100th season of the NFL, even though it was pretty bad. But I want to see, it's not necessarily going to be one of those ones where you're rooting for the guy because Myles Garrett had no business swinging a helmet at someone on the field. But I'm more interested in seeing how the Steelers sort of, what they do in return. I know this is not exciting, but if they hold Myles Garrett to no sacks, make him irrelevant, and blow out the Browns, that's a pretty satisfying revenge game to me. I know some people, Browns fans might want to see, Myles Garrett rack up 3 sacks, tackle for a loss, force a fumble, things like that, but I don't think Myles Garrett deserves the shine there. And one of the more interesting ones, this is definitely an interesting one, but not one that I necessarily care about because it's a bit late. OBJ versus the Giants, or, the Browns versus the Giants. He's finally playing the Giants again, guys. I think it's a little late. I would have, had more hype around this, if it happened the season after he was traded. But, it's not like he's on a very good team right now or a very good performing team. The Giants aren't the best team either. So I think this is going to get so much coverage. It's going to get overhyped, overplayed. You're going to hear about this so often. OBJ returning to his former team, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. But, not going to be any crazy fireworks, but it'll be interesting to watch. Maybe he'll actually perform to his level. Another revenge game I'm super, super excited to watch, guys. Green Bay Packers versus the 49ers. I mentioned this in one of the previous segments. Man, the Packers need revenge desperately. Aaron Rodgers needs revenge desperately. The defense, I don't know why their defense against the Niners is just non-existent. I think both times they scored 37 points on the Packers. The first time, 37-8. Yes, the second time, 37-20. And that 20 was even... The game wasn't as close as that score says. They lost that game from the jump. The 49ers were just running all over them. Raheem Mostert had the game of his life. It was absolutely insane. So definitely excited to see how the Packers come back. I'll be rooting for the Packers in that game for sure. Week 1. Kansas City Chiefs, Houston Texans, Thursday Night Football. Gonna be a wonderful way to open up the season. I can't wait. It's a home game for the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning Super Bowl champs. The Texans are definitely going to be looking for revenge, after that 24-0 lead that they blew when the Chiefs scored 41 unanswered, and we beat them 51-31. Guys, this is definitely going to be one that I think lights up the scoreboards. I know it's not going to be as thrilling as it would have been with DeAndre Hopkins out there, but Deshaun Watson will provide the fireworks for the Texans. I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think the Chiefs win the game, though, as we did in the playoffs. Not having to worry about DeAndre Hopkins certainly is going to help us, and we'll be able to do it again. They're not going to jump out to a 24-0 lead again, and but either way, it's going to be a great game to watch. Now, this next game, there's so many good games next season. The Titans at Baltimore Ravens, Week 11. You already know. I mean, there's not much to say here. The Titans did the Ravens dirty in the playoffs. Nobody expected it, even though I actually was one of the people who said, if the Titans score first, that game is probably over. But I'm not going to lie. Once the Titans punted the ball first, I said, game's over. Ravens got this. Then Lamar Jackson throws the ball a bit high. Mark Andrews doesn't really catch it. Falls into, I don't remember whose hands it was, but Tennessee picks it off. And then the whole dynamic of that game changed. The momentum never swung back in Baltimore's favor. And the Titans pull off possibly the upset of the year. Honestly, for me, that's my upset of the year because, man, every single person counted them out, and it was in such a big game. It wasn't just, regular season game. I know the Dolphins-Patriots game was pretty wild, and so was the Vikings-Saints. But to me, Titans, Ravens, that was an insane game because the Ravens were clearly the favorites to win the Super Bowl, and the Titans just came and shut that down. So in their rematch, I think the Ravens take this one. They're going to come out angry. They're going to come out with fire, hunger, and there's no way Lamar Jackson is going to allow the Titans to beat him again. He's got a vendetta against them, and I think, beating them is going to serve that team well for morale. And, of course, it's going to be later on in the season, so going to help momentum. Now, in Week 16, the Vikings play the Saints. The Saints get their rematch. The Saints are going to win this game. If they don't, man, they must be cursed or something. They have to win this game. Hopefully it's not because of a controversial call or a call that was close or a call that could have gone either way. Hopefully it's a convincing win for the Saints because I'm rooting for Drew Brees in his last season. The Vikings stole that win in the playoffs. To me, they weren't the better team. Drew Brees had a bad day. It was a horrible time to have a bad day, but he did. And, I think they come back, get their revenge, and enter the playoffs as NFC's number 1 seed. So, those are my top revenge games to watch next season, guys. But there are so many good games coming up next season, even just for prime time. Just to name a few that I'm excited to watch, guys. How about the New Orleans Saints at Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Of course, we're going to get those games twice a year. But that on prime time, fireworks, love it. The whole nation gets to watch. Going to be definitely a great game. Another one, guys, Kansas City Chiefs at Baltimore Ravens. And, guys, I didn't mention this in the revenge game, but this is certainly a revenge game for the Baltimore Ravens. I just didn't want to include it in both. But this is going to be a huge game for both teams. Going to be awesome to watch. Yet again, we play early in the season. Baltimore, I believe that Lamar Jackson hasn't beaten Mahomes yet. Mahomes is 2-0 against him. He hasn't lost the Ravens yet. I don't think he'll lose this time around. But this probably is going to be the top primetime game of the season. Of course, anything could happen. It could end up a stinker, boring game. But as of right now, the hype behind this game is real. Definitely be excited for this game, guys. There's going to be a ton of points put up. Unless, we storm out to a crazy lead. Lamar has to throw, make some mistakes. But this is going to be a great game. The 2018 MVP, the 2019 MVP, the 2019 Super Bowl MVP against each other in a revenge game, in a primetime game, Monday Night Football. It's going to be great. I'm actually looking to get some tickets to that game. game. I'm definitely trying to be there to experience that. See two of the league's hottest, probably the two hottest quarterbacks in the league right now, go at it in prime time. Going to be a fantastic game, and possibly a preview of the AFC Championship game. So with that, guys, I'm going to end the show there, guys. I want to thank you for listening to today's show of the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, guys, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to ask that you guys follow us on social media, guys, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, because, that really helps us. And guys, leave a comment below. Let us know what you love. Let us know what you might not love, because that helps us make the show better as well. Leave a nice review. Leave some kind words. And thank you for listening. I'm going to, hopefully next show, get into a more detailed analysis of these schedules and certain players and updates and who you should be drafting based on schedule, things like that. So we'll see. But as of right now, guys, I hope you're staying safe, staying healthy. Have a good night, and thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.